The blockchain realm. It's hard-hitting, relentless,
doing nothing offensively,
and unforgiving.
I told you Sam Reese was going to underestimate his speed and his power.
Only the toughest make it out alive. Many have risen to temporary stardom, but most will not hear the final bell.
You begin from nothing and go back to nothing. And that's exactly where I want to be.
Is it a Ponzi?
Yeah, well, I guess.
Although every champion was once a contender who refused to give up. And this story isn't about failures or false prophets, it's about Solana. Today we're uncovering the untold elements of Solana's comeback, a blockchain that battled endless adversities to redefine its own destiny, from an ambitious launch and meteoric rise to overcoming nearly catastrophic setbacks. This tale of innovation, endurance, and rebirth is arguably unique. But what exactly was it that allowed Solana to survive against all odds, to cement itself as one of the leading Layer 1 blockchains today? In other words, what can we learn about the ups and downs of Solana's journey, which could ultimately shape the industry's future? Stay tuned, because this story is just getting started. Solana's story stands out for a number of reasons. Led by not one but two technical founders in Anatoly Yakovenko and Raj Gokal, Solana set out with a bold vision in 2017 to challenge centralized financial systems. The early use case for Anatoly was simple: to create scalable and efficient blockchain networks that can handle a high volume of transaction without being constrained by block space, unlike Bitcoin and Ethereum. And as the blockchain space evolved over the next few years, so too did Solana, eventually expanding to encompass DeFi, NFTs, and payments.
And I literally had like 2 coffees at Cafe Soleil in San Francisco and a beer. I was up till like 4 in the morning and had this eureka moment that there's a way to encode passage of time as a data structure.
Following the mainnet launch all the way back in March 2020, Solana successfully leveraged its unique proof-of-history consensus mechanism alongside proof-of-stake. This unique hybrid technology aimed to solve the scalability issues that had plagued other blockchains at the time. It even earned Solana the nickname of ETH Killer and sent the SOL token soaring to $250. But before we uncover Solana's trials and tribulations following that explosive growth period, we have to understand what attracted so many people to Solana in the early days. Was it the founders, the tech, the vision, or perhaps it was the community? Let's find out.
When it came to market in 2019 or 2020, the all L1 thesis was super weak, because the prior cycle, when ETH did okay with the ICOs, all L1s that were like zero, there was nothing that really got built on them. So there was no proof that like an L1 could be able to compete with ETH long term. And that's when Solana came out.
Early February 2021, early kind of days, there wasn't a proliferation of all of these different L1s and L2s which actually have liquidity in a bunch of different wrapped coins. The only thing that did work back then was this little project called Solana at the time, which seemed to have got the backing of this exchange called FTX. And they had a lot of the wrapped tokens, and it was fast and cheap, and you could just transact. So that's why we started. That's why we started on Solana. Fast, cheap, you could build smart contracts. The UX was still not amazing back then, but it had potential, and it seemed like there was a lot of people like trying to make it a thing.
So Solana did a really good job of establishing community early on, like that whole run up from what was like $1.50 to like 260 or whatever it was. In that time period, they did a great job of onboarding developers to the ecosystem, like onboarding people like through communities, NFTs and everything else, building that online presence, building that in-person presence.
I think first and foremost, from the technology perspective, it's the scalability. You know, back at the time in 2020, Solana was talking a lot about 65,000 TPS, low latency, sub-second finality, all things that are really important if you want to run a real-time game on-chain. Yeah, I mean, proof of history is really the unique underlying consensus algorithm for Solana. It's a way of establishing a unified timestamp universal time system for all of the activity, transactions, and instructions that are going on across Solana. So it allows for the scalability of parallelized transactions across the entire network, and this is, these parallel systems are what allows for that high transaction throughput and low latency that Solana has brought to the world.
Going back again to the early days, the term ETH killer used to be thrown around quite a bit, maybe a bit too willy-nilly. Yeah. Do you feel that Solana still has that title of being an ETH killer? Do they need that title?
No, I don't think Solana is an ETH killer. I honestly think they're trying to do two very different things. Like, it's not even really a good comparison, because what Solana is trying to do is be like an integrated L1, which is like execution, consensus, settlement all happen on Solana on the L1, whereas Ethereum is really pushing all of the execution off to these L2s and these rollups.
The way that you scale then in Solana land is then down to the hardware. So yes, running a node I can't go and do on my Raspberry Pi or something like that, whereas you can on other chains, and that's fine. But I think the scale and the way that Solana is trying to grow necessitates, okay, you need a very powerful computer and node to be able to do stuff, because it's doing a lot of complex stuff. That's why, complex things require complex solutions.
I think if you had to bet on somebody beating ETH, I think Solana is kind of like at the front runner, the number one spot. If you were to say that Solana's already beaten ETH, I think that's not the case yet in terms of market cap, volume, and TVL, and so on. But maybe in the next cycle, who knows what's going to happen? I think Ethereum's got a lot of catch up to do, and got to try to innovate and be competitive.
Ethereum, in terms of capacity, is nowhere near Solana and where it's at, and what's happening on Solana, and all of the, yes, you can look at TPS metrics, you can say, oh, there's thousands of transactions per second on Solana versus 15 on Ethereum. That's maybe one way to look at it, but I think it's all more about sort of mind share and interest. And right now, mind share is very high on Solana, and that's because it's very easy to use. So ETH killer, the battle's kind of already won.
As Solana's developer base grew, so too did the community and user count, which exacerbated stability challenges. A series of consecutive network outages led to other Layer 1 communities criticizing Solana for being a centralized VC chain, essentially with an on and off switch, which naturally stood against the core principles of decentralization. Tribalism, it seemed, was festering within the Layer 1 space. So how did Solana overcome these challenges?
We just kept building. We didn't have issues with the tech outside of the occasional network haltage or some instability recently, which I think was inspiring to see the community and builders collectively come together and look for solutions. It wasn't relying exclusively on Solana Labs or maybe the foundation to solve the problems. It was, hey, we all believe in the tech. We all know that we can pull through this. What do we need to do to figure this out?
In 2022, there was a period when the chain was literally unusable for people. And they had to fix a ton of that to make sure people would be able to use the chain moving forward. And that took a lot of time, but I think only a few months, I think during 2022 is when they got all those fixes through. And then when 2023 came around, people were still in their heads thinking, oh, Solana doesn't work. But they weren't paying attention to all the dev updates that had happened and all the work that had been done behind the scenes. And still, the speed of innovation is crazy. Whenever something happens, it's they're on it very fast.
You can compare Solana's liveness failure, which is going down, to Ethereum being unaffordable for 99.999% of the population when it's congested, right? So you have Solana, which you can't use it at all, and you have Ethereum, which to send a transaction, it costs you $150. And obviously they aren't the same, and this one is probably worse, you would say, but they're not far off. And it's happened on Solana a few times. It's happened one time in the last year.
Breaking news in New York, where in the last few minutes, Sam Bankman-Fried has been sentenced to 25 years for what's been called one of the biggest financial crimes in US history. These are the live pictures from outside.
He was the founder of the FTX cryptocurrency exchange. When customers went to withdraw their funds in November 2022, the funds were not there. And a jury found that money had been moved to a hedge fund, an investment fund called Alameda Research, and that Sam Bankman-Fried used that money to enrich himself and his inner circle.
What do you think the impact of FTX collapsing was on Solana, and how did the community respond?
Yeah, I mean, publicly it has a huge impact. Like everybody associated SBF as a scammer. FTX was the worst, and he was the biggest proponent of Solana that entire last cycle. It's like, okay, Solana's a scam. Like that's literally just the connection that people made.
I think that it's the nature of probably people in general, but especially emphasized in crypto, this tribalism. And so if you were not a fan of Solana to start with, this is a weak point that you can attack in a moment of weakness. So yes, people were more outspoken. They felt justified in saying that Solana was a scam or Solana will fail or what have you.
We had not only the bear market of number goes down, then we had FTX, then we had all of these other ones, BlockFi and all of these other lenders blowing up, and then we had Do Kwon and Luna, and just hit after hit, and a lot of that affected Solana really, really poorly.
For me, it's always been an image thing. The tech was always good. The image was the issue, and the image was massively hit by SBF and FTX.
I don't want to place judgment, but we did see teams leave Solana, move to other networks.
So if we were to look at it objectively and say, how much impact does Alameda have? The answer is not that much. The reality of the effect was exaggerated perhaps by social media or anything like that, and that's why, hey, Sol went to $8, but a lot of us in the Solana ecosystem were looking around and like, actually everything works fine. It's the same as it always has been. We're not beholden to anyone. So, but I think it was a perception problem.
Obviously that was incredibly tragic, the entire situation. But I think at the end of the day, it's necessary for us to go through those things. It's a very big growing pain, but I think it's a necessary one because it continues to move us closer to legitimacy. The fact that the government has been forced to come in and like truly familiarize themselves with what is actually Web3, I think is only going to benefit all of us in the long run.
We maintained our conviction. We doubled down on Solana. We kept building on Solana. But sure, the criticisms are there. The network instability recently and network stoppages in the past. We understand this is new technology. We're working at the bleeding edge in everything that we do. And so for us, this isn't uncomfortable. It's just part of operations.
The biggest thing that could kill Solana was eliminated back then. So in the short run, like FTX, yes, it was painful. In the long run, I think it's super positive that something like that happened, and it happened back then already, and like it was not delayed until now, because once again it made the community much more stronger, and the network, again, ownership as a whole. So I think Solana came out quite strong out of it.
Forests can't grow properly without forest fires, right? They're terrible, they're tragic, but they're necessary. And I think, while I would not say like the way that the FTX situation happened, like the how of it was not necessary, but these are the types of things that, it's like, would it be nice if we could grow without these kinds of growing pains? Absolutely. But they're called growing pains for a reason, right?
Despite the endless stream of tweets, headlines, and FUD arguing that Solana would never survive the FTX collapse, the Solana ecosystem was hard at work behind the scenes. But what exactly was the comeback strategy?
This was kind of like $10 kind of thing, like $15, I think, when everyone was like, Solana's over, like everyone was dunking on Solana and saying that it was shit and stuff. And as a bit of a maxi, right? Like it's my baby, like it affects me. And so I wrote this long page like, am I missing something? Like, am I not seeing something that everyone else is seeing about Solana? And so I wrote this long page, this A4 page of like my argument about my thesis. And I basically concluded that Solana had an image problem.
Solana Foundation is doing a lot of interesting things. Like they do have these boot camps that they organize around the world to kind of attract developers. There's an interesting way to kind of get people to build on the Solana. And I think being cheap, being fast, has very good properties in onboarding a lot of people to Solana.
Well, I think the developers was a really good differentiator for Solana, certainly during the bear times, in that how Solana thought about growth was we just need people building apps, which I think is the correct mentality. Because other chains that had a big treasury, let's say they have a couple of $100 million, they were trying to attract people to that chain, and the way that they thought about growth was let's go and pay insert big company, I don't know, Starbucks or something like that. Let's go and pay them $10 million and then promote our product. Solana went around it going, hey, let's go and make a whole bunch of developer conferences and get them to all go and build apps. And essentially, okay, maybe 90% of them fail, but at least A, they're building on your chain, and B, maybe they make an app which is really good and then you get 1 million users on it tomorrow. So I think, yeah, the way that Solana went about building that traction, definitely very heavily developer focused, maybe less so now, but I think it's just the pie is bigger, and that's why.
Solana survived that scandal because of the community. 100% in my opinion. You know, it was don't get me wrong, you know, the team, they obviously, you know, they had a part of it, they were a factor in it, but you know, the Solana Labs team has, you know, for years been, in a sense, teaching the community how to be self-sufficient. And I think, you know, that teaching paid off in that moment because you didn't see like totally everywhere, right? You didn't see Solana Labs team everywhere. You saw the community everywhere. You saw leaders of the community. You know, you saw influential figures of the community. They were all out there, not attacking, not, you know, being defensive. They were all out there just trying to help. And so yeah, I think, you know, community far and away is the biggest reason why the Solana ecosystem not only survived that whole situation, but is emerging from it stronger.
From my point of view, it seems like it's very top down. Like Anatoly leads very much, very directly in how he thinks about developing on Solana. Must like do things fast, break things, and then fix them. And it's like, if it breaks, okay, cool, we'll fix it, we'll figure it out. He's like very forward thinking in that way. I think it's kind of the same thought process he has around like hardware on Solana. He's like, we want to use the most out of this hardware that we can. We're not really concerned with doing the opposite. I think it's really like forward thinking.
Developers go to where the users are, and the users are on Solana because it's cheap to trade on, for example, cheap and fast, easy to onboard users, and that's kind of where it is.
Solana went from near oblivion to one of today's top layer 1 blockchains. It's a remarkable comeback that caught most of the industry by surprise. But how did the community achieve this?
Well, in crypto, price leads a lot. So it was sideways between like $15 and $30 in that range for like 9-10 months. And there are a ton of people, like smart institutional money, like smart retail traders who were just bidding in that range. And then like eventually when there was more demand than supply and it broke out above 30, there was a ton of active people who were like, oh, now I need to pay attention to Solana. And then when people started actually bridging over to Solana, like, oh, what am I gonna buy? Then Bonk went from like, what, 30 million to whatever it is now, like $1 billion. And then people were like, okay, we can buy alts on Solana now. There's a proof of concept. Bonk just went crazy. Okay, what else is we're gonna do? And then that's when all the memes started popping up. Like a lot of people started launching their tokens. I think Jito was big. The airdrop for Jito was really, really big for people because that was a wealth effect similar to what happened with Uniswap on ETH. And all those people who got the Uniswap airdrop were like, oh, now I have $1,000 to play around on chain with. And it was the same thing for Jito, but it was even more substantial because there was not as many users as there was on Ether that were active on Solana using Jito. Now, I was telling people all of last year, it's like you're not competing with a ton of people now because it's not consensus that Solana is going to do well. So yeah, Jito airdrop, a few Jupiter airdrop, there are a few other airdrops that do well, and then just literally all the memes just popped off immediately as Solana was going up.
For example, now to me it's the attention chain. So if you're launching something high frequency, if you're launching a new NFT project or a new meme coin really, your number one place now is Solana because it's super cheap, it's super fast to use, and the audience is there.
So I think Solana is very good in that sense in reaching out to the retail market, especially those who are not from the developed country, who cannot afford to pay $10 or $5 per transaction. A lot of people from developing countries don't have a desktop. People don't trade with the desktop. They want to trade on, they only have, their smartphone is their only device, and people must be able to trade easily on their smartphone. I think Solana has cracked that UX problem.
What does the acronym OPOS stand for?
Only possible on Solana.
What does that mean?
I think it was a really good slogan that like the marketing team at Solana came out with this past cycle during 2023. a lot of people, I think it originated on Twitter, but essentially what it means is like there are things you can do on Solana that you can't do on ETH and other L1s. So like any application that requires a ton of throughput, you can't do on ETH because ETH only does 15 transactions per second. So anything that you need like really heavy loaded transactions, you can't do on ETH, only possible on Solana. In the same way that like anybody can like dollar cost average into meme coins, $1 a pop, basically for free, you can't do that on ETH because when activity spikes, it's really expensive to transact on chain. So again, only possible on Solana. I think it's kind of a slogan for what's possible to build on the chain, and also the user experience is way better on Solana than other chains.
Well, right now, Solana has the highest DEX volume of any chain, so it's number one. In terms of like TVL utilization, also number one. In terms of user base, I think some of the wallets, they have like 7 million active users. I think Phantom last week was saying that. I know Soulflare have about 3 million active users. These are huge numbers.
If you look at Solana metrics compared to ETH now, like Solana's doing as much MEV as ETH is right now. It's doing comparable DEX volumes as ETH is right now. There's equal amount of daily active users on Solana as there is on ETH. A ton of the other metrics objectively are on par with Ethereum. And the only reason that can exist is because of the tech behind the scenes. So like you can do fees that are 100x lower than Ethereum, but you also have 100x amount of activity, which is why they're like kind of comparable in how much the chain is making or profiting. But that only works if the tech works. You can have the community, but you can only do that if the tech works.
And in spite of the challenges that we've seen Solana face over the years, I think it's extremely promising what has already been accomplished. And I think the simple fact that we're seeing these stresses on the network are just a demonstration of the level of adoption and use and product market fit of Solana itself. So I'm encouraged by it. I'm not discouraged by it. Ultimately, the proof is in the pudding. We're here now. The network's doing better than it's ever done before. And the sentiment across Solana is as good as it's ever been.
One thing that I think the Solana team has done an amazing job of is building a culture that people want to be a part of. There's a big element for all of us. We all want to be a part of something bigger than ourselves. And I feel like the Solana's tapped into that in a very effective way.
Now it seems so obvious, right? Like we have millions of dollars in volume, everyone's on Solana, it's the meme coin chain. But back then it was like, why would you use Solana? Like you have Binance or you have ETH, basically. And now it's like, holy shit, Solana's the place to be.
Solana has seen a lot of growth and adoption in the last 1 or 2 years. I think the meta for this crypto cycle is Solana.
Bitcoin's clearly this store of value thing, but it's kind of like just being like a gold bar. That seems to be where Bitcoin's stuck at the moment. Pet rock kind of thing, right? So, okay, cool. I mean, that's good for people that want pet rocks, but for people that are trying to build a financial system, I think Solana's where it's at.
In the end, Solana's journey has been nothing short of a roller coaster. Following a meteoric rise, the ecosystem had to overcome growing pains like network outages and catastrophes like the FTX debacle, yet somehow managed to bounce back stronger each time. To address our first question about the industry's future, resilience and innovation was the key to Solana's impressive resurgence, while the reality for those within the ecosystem is that Solana's unique blend of community strength and cutting-edge tech makes it one of a kind. Today, Solana is one of the leading L1 chains for metrics like active wallets, TVL, and transaction volumes. For anyone curious about the future, Michael Wagner has this to say.
It's going to be really tough to compete with Solana at this point, though.